Jack's first concert, with a crowd of 100,000 people. He sang the love songs he wrote for me years ago, to propose to his new love. The camera panned over the crowd and skimmed over me for a split second. After the show, I was dragged into a car. Jack grabbed my wrist and asked fiercely, "Why did you still show up? What do you want? What will it take for you to leave me alone?" I thought about it and said, "Give me another 3 million. He sneered, wrote a check, and threw it in my face. "I knew you were in it for the money." Later, he chased me to the hospital, his eyes red, asking the doctor, "How can she be cured?" I sighed next to him and said, "Jack, you know very well that no amount of money can cure late-stage cancer." When the doctor handed me the diagnosis, Jack happened to call. I motioned for the doctor to wait and answered the phone, but it wasn't Jack speaking. It was a brisk, unfamiliar female voice. "Miss Tina, Jack is currently at a critical point in his career. You don't have the capability to continue as his manager. Giant Rock Company will pay you reasonable compensation, but please do not have any further contact with him." She said a lot, but I didn't respond. So her tone finally showed slight frustration. "What else do you want?" "I want to see Jack one more time." There was suddenly silence on the other end. Moments later, I heard a very familiar voice, cold and indifferent. "Agree to it." It was Jack. Before leaving the hospital, the doctor repeatedly urged me, "Tina, your cancer cells have started to spread. You need to be hospitalized for chemotherapy as soon as possible." I gently acknowledged and folded the diagnosis, putting it into my bag. The agreed meeting place was a penthouse suite in a hotel. When I entered, the room was a mess, filled with an indefinable subtle smell. A strong wave of nausea rose up, and I rushed to the bathroom to retch, almost bringing up bile. Jack stood by the window, his expression cold. "What other compensation do you want that you have to say in person?" Rachel sat on the sofa, poking her head out. "Tina, nobody's ever satisfied. You're just a manager. How much more compensation do you want to be enough?" She was a junior from Jack's company, with a charming face. I looked at her, feeling a moment of daze. Jack had met Rachel shortly after signing with Giant Rock 2 years ago. The young girl obviously liked him, but back then, Jack's heart and mind were all about me. When did things change? It seemed to have started last winter. One night, Jack was about to go on stage for an event, but was still backstage and hadn't come out. I went looking for him and saw him with Rachel in the makeup room. Rachel had her back turned, and he had her encircled in his arms. Jack was fastening a necklace around her neck. "What's the scent of your perfume?" "It smells nice. Water lily." With that, she turned around and smiled. "If you like it, Senior, I'll give you a bottle next time." As she spoke, her lips lightly brushed against Jack's cheek. Their movements paused, and in the ambiguous atmosphere, Rachel looked up, her ears and face flushed. "Tina, settle this quickly. We have an event tonight." Jack's cold words pulled me back to reality. I tried to suppress the pain in my heart and smiled. "The price you offered before was for a manager, but you know, our relationship isn't that simple." Jack reacted violently, standing up and staring at me with ice-cold eyes. After a moment, he finally softened his voice and said to Rachel, "You go out first. I'll talk to her." As soon as Rachel left, he walked straight to me, grabbing my wrist hard. "Tina, do you want to destroy me?" He used to look at me with eyes full of intense love, but now, all that remained was bitter hatred. It seemed like he wanted to kill me. I struggled to smile. "You haven't told them that we got married, have you?" "No, I haven't." His grip tightened like he wanted to break it. "Thanks to that marriage certificate. Otherwise, you'd have no grounds for this extortion, right?" I remembered 2 years ago, when he took me to the civil affairs office to get married. He said, "From now on, every penny I earn is our joint property." Tina, I've been waiting for this day since I was 18. Back then, Jack was like a clingy little puppy, and he took me to every music festival he performed at. But one day, the little puppy turned back and bit me hard. I looked into his eyes and calmly said, "I want 60 million. His fame was still new, so he had earned about that much so far. If he gave it to me, his finances would be tight. Impossible. He let go, coldly staring at me. "If you really want closure, make the price reasonable, and we can talk." "Tina, you aren't worth as much as you think." We had been together for 11 years, rising from obscurity to now. Now, with one sentence, he defined it. "Tina, don't think you're worth that much." Jack slammed the door. I walked to the doorway, and saw Rachel throw herself into his arms, gently comforting him. She said only 2 sentences, and Jack's expression softened immediately. He embraced Rachel. For a moment, he looked up and saw me at the door, but he kissed her without hesitation. Rachel coquettishly murmured, "Gentle, Senior." I stood in the room, the smells around me slowly enveloping me like a rising tide, bringing a suffocating, near-death feeling. Honestly, now that I'm alone, I have no use for the money, but I feel so bad, so bad. I just couldn't think of any way, without affecting myself, to make him suffer like I do except taking that money. The event was live-streamed that night. Jack and Rachel walked the red carpet side by side, smiling at the journalists' questions. Now that you both work at the same company and were schoolmates, is something good coming soon? Rachel just shyly smiled and said nothing, while Jack replied calmly, we'll let things take their course. I heard that Jack's former manager was dismissed for incompetence and embezzling money. Let bygones be bygones. I don't want to go after it, he said. I stood by the window, my hands trembling as I turned off the live stream. The moonlight shone coldly through. That night, I dreamt of the past again. Jack and I used to live here. When he wrote a new song, he would lean by the window and play it for me. Behind him, through the window, were thousands of lights. Those songs, which are now sung by millions, had only one listener back then, me. Jack said, wait for me to become famous. When I have my first concert with 10,000 fans, I will propose to you in front of the world. But then, when he gained all that attention, the first person he left was me. Waking up, the severe pain in my stomach nearly caused me to faint. The sunlight was scorching, but it couldn't disperse the chill. The room was empty. For all these years, Jack was the only one with me. My only friend had gone abroad for further studies after college and eventually settled there. She never liked Jack. We hardly contact each other anymore. I fell off the side of the bed, curling up on the floor, cold sweat covering me from the pain, a metallic taste of blood filling my mouth. Jack called at that moment. Have you thought it through? His tone was cold and impatient, but still trying to persuade me. If you ask for less money, I'll give it to you easily. The sooner this ends, the sooner you can do whatever you want. What good does dragging this out do for you? Tina, say something. The pain eased for a moment, and I slowly sat up, leaning against the bed frame, my voice rapid. All right, half. He seemed surprised by how agreeable I was. Really? Yes, but you have to come home, bring the first guitar, and sing me a song. I didn't even know what I was still longing for. Maybe because when people are dying, they hold on to the parts of life they can't let go of. When Jack returned, I happened to be downstairs. He got out of the car. Rachel was with him. I couldn't help but sneer. So close that you can't be apart for a moment. Rachel, holding his arm, smiled warmly but helplessly. Tina, you might be too old to understand young people's affection. Being inseparable is normal in the honeymoon phase. How could I not understand? Jack and I had a very long honeymoon phase. Long enough that I once thought it would last forever. Before following me upstairs, Rachel deliberately held on to Jack, leaving a lipstick mark on his white shirt collar. Come back soon. I'll wait for you downstairs. Her tone was sweet, and she added that they had plans to watch the sunset at the coastal park later. With that voice, she sang many love songs with Jack. Jack nodded. Upstairs, Jack entered the house and sat on the old couch, then took the guitar from behind his back. What do you want to hear? Proposal. He froze at that, frowning and looking at me like I was a monster. I wonder what flashed through his mind at that moment. Maybe the memory of 18-year-old Jack and 20-year-old Tina sitting side by side on the edge of the school field. In the dark, he played his guitar perfectly. After singing, he would put away the guitar and hold me close on his shoulder. This is the song I'm most proud of, for my dearest Tina. But now, after a long moment, he suddenly sneered, playing the affection card. Are you? Tina, let me tell you, impossible. If you want to hear it, I'll play it for you. What was once a beautiful love song, he played in a broken, fragmented way. I sighed. Your singing has degraded this much, yet you're still famous. It's ridiculous. That struck a nerve, and he almost jumped from the couch. Who are you to say that? I trusted you completely those years, letting you handle everything. And look, your judgment and work were so poor. If I hadn't left you, I'd never be this successful. A metallic taste surged in my mouth, but I swallowed it back down. I looked at him, nodding. Yes, my judgment was bad. Enough nonsense. He put away the guitar and impatiently reached out his hand. Your phone, give it to me. What for? I can give you the money, but I need to delete the old photos and chat logs first, right? He raised his eyebrows. Otherwise, would you keep these to blackmail me again? I got my bag and rummaged inside for my phone. By mistake, I pulled out a folded diagnosis paper which fell to the ground. My heartbeat nearly stopped for a moment, but I quickly realized how ridiculous my reaction was. Because Jack didn't even bother to glance at it, he just took my phone, deleting everything about him, including the backups on the cloud. He knew well that I wouldn't expose any of it. I was utterly terrified of endless arguments and disputes. Back when Jack first gained some fame, he was embroiled in a plagiarism scandal. All his social media accounts were flooded with bad comments, and he couldn't handle it. So I managed everything. One night, Staying up late. I opened a private message. A bloody ghost image popped out, with Jack's face crudely photoshopped onto it. Since then, I stayed silent online. Jack finished deleting everything and stood up. Let's go, before the civil affairs office closes. Let's get the divorce certificate. On the way, I sat in the passenger seat, while he and Rachel were in the back. He didn't avoid her. He must have placated Rachel long ago. I could see everything clearly in the rearview mirror. Rachel played with his fingers and said casually, "That guitar is so beat up. How about I get you a new one?" "Sure," Jack answered without hesitation. Rachel looked up at me, a hint of meaning in her gaze. "Some things are old and outdated. They should have been thrown away long ago." The painkillers were too light, and the pain in my stomach grew stronger. Cold sweat dripped from my forehead as I finally couldn't hold back anymore and said, "Jack, if your girlfriend says one more word, I'm gonna ask for an extra 10 million. Otherwise, this divorce is off." Rachel finally went quiet. We managed to get our divorce certificate right before the Civil Affairs Bureau closed. Jack and Rachel went to Coastal Park to watch the sunset, while I took a cab to the hospital. We went our separate ways. On the way, the driver was listening to the radio, and coincidentally, Jack's song was playing. It was from his debut album, For the Lover. Back then, his voice was still clear and pure, each word sung with deep affection. But that lover had been killed by his own hands last autumn. I still remember last autumn. Jack had skyrocketed to fame with an album that was nominated for the highest award. Along with it, the company assigned him a new manager, while I hid in a hotel for half a month, because there were reporters everywhere near our home. That midnight, he came back from the celebration party, reeking of alcohol and wearing a stranger's perfume. It smelled like water lilies. I sat on the sofa, looking at him quietly. "Jack, I want to go out." "No way." He walked over, stood in front of me, and looked down. Some of our dates seemed to have been exposed, and now those reporters are looking for evidence. "Don't ruin this for me." My heart twisted in pain as I looked up at him. "So I'm something that can't be seen. For the sake of your career, I have to hide here forever, right?" There was a hint of malice in his eyes. "What's this fussing about? Tina, you've changed. I've stayed up nights on end writing songs, endured brutal edits on variety shows, and you haven't shown a shred of concern. Now I've won an award, and you can't even congratulate me." After saying that, probably overcome by drunkenness, he ignored me and slammed the door on his way out. The first to change says I changed. I blinked, thinking I was smiling, but tears were streaming down my face. At first, I did not check into the hospital. I just went for regular treatments. With that money, I bought the rental apartment where I had lived for many years. Because it was an old place with outdated decor, and many memories tied to it, the landlord gave me a good price and repeatedly asked me, "Are you sure you want to buy this place?" I nodded. Soon, I would be dead. If I died in someone else's house, wouldn't it be a hassle for them? 30 million was indeed a hefty sum. Buying the apartment used up less than 1/10 of it. I set aside enough for my treatment and donated the rest. The third time I passed out at home from vomiting blood, I had no choice but to check into the hospital. Call your family to take care of you. But I had no family. I had no father since I was born, and it was just my mom and me. She had a congenital heart condition and passed away before I turned 18. The doctor suggested I hire a caregiver. "With your health, you'll soon struggle to move. You'll need help with some things. I'll think about it." The TV in the hospital room was playing an ad for Jack's solo concert. He was going to perform at the new stadium in the city, the first in the country to hold 100,000 people. The camera zoomed in, showing a hint of tenderness in his cold, sharp eyes. "I've awaited this day for many years. I hope all my fans who love me can come." A strange impulse made me think of 5 years ago. Back then, our favorite singer was on tour, and Jack bought us tickets to see him. When the singer performed She Came to My Concert, Jack suddenly grabbed my hand. "One day, you'll come to my solo concert too." He said it with such solemnity, his eyes sparkling like stars in the night. "Tina, believe me. I always believed in him. Otherwise, why would I have followed his advice? Left my job to be his manager without a fixed salary. In the beginning, he was indeed very good to me. The money he earned from songs and performances was all deposited into my account. Young people can't hide their feelings. He often posted odd, fragmented sentences on various platforms. His few fans couldn't decipher them. Only he and I knew those were secret love declarations meant for the two of us. But later, Jack deleted them all. Back then, Jack never called me by my full name. When he was being cute, he called me Tina or Tina. In special moments, he sometimes called me Senior. Jack was a grade below me in high school. He was 2 years and 2 grades younger. We met in the summer. He and some classmates were playing basketball and accidentally knocked over my stack of test papers. As exams were approaching, the school held an arts night for the graduates. Jack went on stage with his guitar, tall and slender, with sharp features. He said, "I want to sing Jade Chose Her Eyelashes for Senior Tina from class 6 of the 3rd year. Senior, wait for me for 2 years. See you in college." That day, I was in the hospital room, getting painkillers and anti-nausea injections, when 2 young girls appeared at the door. They were from the light symptom ward upstairs. They whispered to each other, "Is it her? She looks like her, but skinnier and older." I called them in. "Do you need something? Because I've been throwing up non-stop lately. My voice sounds like a broken bellows." 2 people came in, pushing each other, looking at me eagerly. "Tina, do you know Jack?" I stiffened. How could I not know? His concert ads have been everywhere for a month. "So were you and him in a relationship?" A young girl pulled out her phone, tapped a few times, and handed it to me. It was a video, very short, probably shot with a phone, a bit blurry, but still clear enough. It was at the beach by a music festival. It was drizzling, and Jack and I were walking one behind the other. I was carrying his other guitar. Suddenly a gust of wind blew, and Jack stopped, took off his jacket, and wrapped it tightly around me. Then he slung the other guitar over his shoulder, held me close, and we walked on. Watching it, my eyes started to get misty. Almost forgot, we did have some good times. "Tina, why are you crying?" The crisp voice of the young girl pulled me out of my memories. "So is this really you and Jack in the video? Did he dump you for Rachel as soon as he got famous?" I didn't know how to answer. Luckily, a nurse came in to check the room and took them out. I pulled out my phone and saw that Facebook was in an uproar. Someone had leaked this video from years ago, saying I wasn't just Jack's manager, but had been in a relationship with him, and that Jack had dumped me for fame and glory. Scrolling down, I realized that while I had been suffering and not online much, Jack and Rachel had gone public with their relationship. "Tina, over here." A young girl waved at me, her face full of youthful energy. I just smiled, saying nothing. The music started, and Jack looked especially dazzling under the spotlight. He wore a fancy outfit, a confident smile on his face, as if he had the whole world in his hands. The Jack on stage seemed like a different person from the one I remembered. Halfway through the concert, one of the songs I knew well started playing. Jack's voice was still as captivating. He used to promise me many wonderful things with that same voice. I closed my eyes, letting the tears fall, as if it was all just yesterday. When the concert ended, I felt weak and sat for a bit. Fans left one by one, leaving me in the gradually emptying stadium. "Tina," a voice came from behind. I turned around and saw Lucy standing there, her eyes complicated. "Tina, what are you doing here?" I asked softly. She didn't answer, just walked over silently, handing me a bottle of water. "I know about your condition," Lucy finally said. "Sorry, I didn't want you to worry." She sighed, her eyes filled with tears. "Silly, I'm your friend, aren't I? No matter what, I'm here with you." We sat quietly, not talking. The sky got darker, and the stage was being dismantled, as if the previous splendor was just a dream. After a long time, Lucy asked softly, "What are you going to do? Expose everything about him?" I looked into the distance and shook my head. "The most important thing now is to live well. I won't dwell on the other stuff." She nodded, helping me up. "Let's go home." When I opened my door, Jane was waiting on the couch, holding a cup of coffee. I smiled and nodded at her. "Nina's here too. She's in the kitchen making tea," Jane said softly. Not long after, Nina came out with a tray of tea. Seeing me, she smiled. "Take a break, don't overdo it." Surrounded by friends, I felt a warmth in my heart, thinking this is the most important part of life. Even if I can't change the past, I'm willing to face the future with them by my side. I'm no longer alone. Each day spent in the hospital, Lucy always visited me. Her presence made the room feel like home. Jane often came too, bringing interesting books that offered me some comfort during the hard treatments. One day, Lucy and I were walking slowly in the hospital garden. She suddenly mentioned, "Jack is really famous now. He probably will never know how much you sacrificed to help him." I smiled, looking at the blooming flowers in the distance. Maybe it's better that way. I don't need anyone's gratitude. People have to move forward, don't they? Lucy nodded, her eyes filled with deep emotion and reluctance. Time flew by, and I wasn't sure how much time I had left, but I cherished every person around me. I knew I hadn't lived in vain. The wind blew gently. I lifted my head and let the sunlight wash over my face. Suddenly, I felt very light. "Thank you all, and thanks for this love. I whispered in my heart. Tina, are you a fan too? I heard Jack's proposing to Rachel today. Is it true? My smile was hidden behind my mask. I heard. Throughout the concert, I quietly watched Jack from the audience. He sang many songs, none from his first album, probably avoiding any reminders of me. Except for this one. My next song is called Proposal, dedicated to Rachel. Thank you for sticking by me through thick and thin, all these years, until today. The lyrics were unchanged, except for the name in the last line. 18-year-old Jack sat in the dark, strumming the song, gripping Tina's hand tightly in response to her question. I don't care, I just think we'll be together for many years. When I make it big, I'll buy you the most beautiful wedding dress. Amidst the cheers, Rachel walked onto the stage in a white wedding dress, her eyes sparkling with tears, yet her smile the happiest of all. Flashes went off, and there were people taking pictures all around. I stood up and walked out. The girl who had talked to me earlier asked in surprise, Tina, you're not staying for the rest? There are a few more songs. No, I've heard enough. My favorite song. I already heard it back in the summer when I was 20. As I reached the stadium exit, a sharp pain surged in my stomach. My vision went black, and I doubled over, clutching my stomach, stumbling into the bathroom. By the time the pain subsided, the concert had ended. I walked out through a side door, head down, taking out my phone to call Nina. Suddenly, a strong force grabbed me and pulled me into a nanny van parked nearby. Jack clutched my wrist and asked angrily, "Why are you here?" He probably just came off stage, still wearing glitter makeup around his eyes. I looked at the empty seat next to him. "Where's Rachel?" He didn't answer, just kept questioning. "Why do you keep showing up? What more do you want? When will you let me go?" So it seemed I was the one not letting go of him. I thought for a moment and casually said, "Give me another 3 million. Jack looked at me with disdain, wrote a check, and threw it in my face. I knew it was about money. I put the check away, got pushed out of the van by his agent, and stumbled a few steps before steadying myself. Jack's voice called out from behind me, "Stop making yourself look so pitiful and come begging. Next time, I won't give you any money." 11 years. So the only thing left between us was assumptions about me. When Nina and I got back to the hospital, it was already late. She helped me remove my makeup and change clothes. Then she asked, "What do you want to eat tomorrow?" We both knew the only thing I could eat now was a specific liquid diet. But I humored her. I'd love to try those overly sweet American cakes, and see how bad they really taste. "That's easy. I'll go out tomorrow and scour the city to get you one." After a few more words, I took out the check and handed it to her. "Nina, here's a little gift for you." In the dim light of the hospital room, she looked at Jack's signature on the check and froze. "You saw him?" "Yeah, he told me not to make myself look so pitiful. Said I won't get any money next time." With teary eyes, Nina said, "I'll kill him." I patted her hand, wanting to say something, but suddenly felt a wave of drowsiness wash over me. "Forget it, I'll sleep for a bit. We can talk when I wake up." That sleep lasted a long, long time. Scenes in my dreams played like a movie. At 18, when my mom passed away waiting for a heart donor, I placed her ashes in the suburban cemetery and stayed home for a few days before going back to school. And on the first day, I met Jack. He bumped into me, scattering the papers I was holding, hurried to help pick them up, then tugged at my uniform sleeve before leaving. "My name's Jack." At 22, I used money earned from part-time jobs to buy Jack a new guitar case. We sat in the corner of the second-level sightseeing bus, with falling leaves swirling around his head. He casually shook his head and handed me the guitar. "Tina, play something." I didn't know how, so I plucked the strings randomly. Yet he applauded enthusiastically. The best music in the world. At 26, after getting our marriage certificate, I was making noodles in the kitchen when Jack suddenly hugged me from behind. With his face against my shoulder, voice hoarse, he said, "Tina, I'm starving. Don't bother me. The noodles will be ready soon." But he said, "It's another kind of hunger." He turned me to face him. "Tonight is our wedding night. Don't you get it?" At 28, on the day of the first frost, I visited my mom's grave. Returning home, I found everything of his was gone. No answer on any of his calls. Deep into the night, he finally texted 3 words, "It's over." This dream was long and detailed. It felt like I'd never wake up. I later learned I'd been in a coma for 5 days, my vital signs deteriorating. The hospital had even issued a critical condition notice. When I awoke, bright lights blinded me. I heard Nina's voice, filled with anger and hatred. "Get out." I struggled to turn my head, and saw her blocking the door with open arms, facing Jack. After a flawless exit from the stage, Jack took a deep breath, ready to head to the dressing room to remove his makeup. Manager Logan hurried over with a serious expression. Tina was in the audience just now. He paused. Logan continued, she hasn't given up. After all the money she took, she still wants to leech off you. Jack, if you don't deal with her, no matter how famous you get, she'll be your constant worry. Jack wanted to say Tina wouldn't do that, but thinking about the 3 million she took recently, he held back. It had been too long. Maybe she had changed. So he followed Logan out, too rushed to even remove his stage makeup, and met her in the nanny van. In the dim light of the van, he couldn't clearly see her expression, but she looked pale and much thinner. Jack felt a pang of inexplicable anger. She had 3 million. How could she end up like this? Maybe Logan was right. She sought him again, because of his fame. But the feel of her wrist in his hand felt off. They'd always lived frugally. So Tina had always been thin, but not this fragile. Her wrist seemed ready to snap. And when he pushed her out of the van, he clearly felt her protruding shoulder blades. After leaving the company, he went back to find Logan for answers. He overheard Logan's conversation with the assistant. Have you checked how long she can live? Logan's voice was cold and mocking. End-stage cancer, but still attending concerts. Just how much does she love him? The assistant replied, I heard she has only a few months left. All right. Just endure it. Make sure Jack never finds out. The company's invested a lot in him. Jack stood frozen outside the door, mind blank and unable to think. What were they talking about? End-stage cancer, attending concerts. After leaving the building, he began to investigate. It actually isn't that hard to find out. No matter how powerful the agency is, they can't keep such a thing completely secret. But he never thought in that direction. To him, Tina was the strongest, never getting hurt. In those years before he became famous, she ran around tirelessly to seek every possible opportunity for him. She drank until her stomach bled, but calmly arranged everything. You take the investor to the car, then come back and pick me up to go to the hospital. Jack cried by her bedside, and she comforted him. It's okay. It's just a minor ailment. I'll be fine soon. So Jack always thought she would be fine quickly after leaving him. More than half a month ago, he finished recording a variety show and went to drink with a few guests. During the drinking session, everyone wore masks, being fake yet friendly. After it ended, for some reason, he had the assistant drive him back. An old apartment in an old neighborhood, totally out of place with his multi-million Maserati. As soon as Jack got out of the car, a man approached and offered him a cigarette. Wearing a mask, he waved his hand to refuse. The man didn't recognize him, smiled knowingly, and pointed at the car. Renting this for a day isn't cheap, right? Must have cost you big, huh? Bro, I'm getting married next month. Planning to rent one to make my wife look good. He patted Jack on the shoulder. Women, they may not say it, but they still want it deep down. Where that sudden, unspeakable heartache came from, he didn't know. He just suddenly missed Tina. Before knocking on the door, Jack even started feeling uncharacteristically nervous. He feared Tina would mercilessly throw him out, yet he thought, no, that's Tina, who has been with him for so many years. She wouldn't do that. Whatever he did, she would understand and forgive. That's how it always had been. But Tina never came to open the door. Instead, an elderly lady upstairs came down to water the plants, saw him there, and greeted him. Jack, long time no see. I thought you'd moved out. She was quite old and naturally couldn't recognize him as the currently popular singer. To her eyes, Jack was still that poor art enthusiast. Seeing him waiting there, she kindly reminded, Tina hasn't been here for a long time since buying this house. You should call her and see where she is. She slowly walked downstairs. The assistant softly advised, let's go back, Jack. With your current status, it's not good to get noticed. Miss Tina's finances are good now. She's probably out of town having fun. Who knows when she'll be back? And at that moment, he finally understood why the assistant said what she did. Because they genuinely hoped Tina would die soon, so he wouldn't see her again, and cause more complications. Jack numbly sat back in the car and returned to the newly arranged residence, a nearly 200 square meter high-rise apartment. Up to this point, he thought he was calm. To reach the top, you have to let go of some things. Tina was one of those things he let go of, because he had enough of never getting famous, having his own songs plagiarized, getting abused by extreme fans for years, and always waiting in the corner for a break at events. He had talent and skills. Why couldn't he rise to fame? Jack walked into the study, pulled open a cabinet, and found an old, slightly faded guitar case in the corner. The zipper was a bit off color, because Tina had replaced it when it broke. Jack's heart crumbled at this moment. He always thought he did great, decisive, calm, leaving no room. He possessed all the qualities a top singer should have and deserved to be enormously successful. He also decisively separated from Tina, giving her almost all his liquid assets. Even if her reputation wasn't great, and she was just an ordinary person, she wouldn't live badly with money. But it turned out she was dying. She was dying. Jack suddenly got up, went downstairs, and drove to the hospital. His expression stayed fairly calm, because he felt he could still endure it. Until he arrived at the hospital, just as Tina was being wheeled out of the ICU. And Nina was there, crying to the point of numbness. He recognized Nina immediately, because she was really annoying. Back when he and Tina first dated, Nina kept advising Tina to be cautious, saying he would change. At 18, Jack found that ridiculous. He liked Tina so much, how could he ever change? But at this moment, standing in the hospital corridor, facing Nina's hateful gaze, he suddenly thought, she wasn't wrong at all. As a popular singer, more people gathered around, recognizing him. A nurse had to disperse the crowd and asked him to speak inside. Nina stood guard by my bed, staring at him coldly. What's this? Jack the big star coming down to give your ex-wife another check personally. Jack ignored her, only staring directly at me. He saw the bruised needle marks on my arms, my sunken cheeks, and my bald head from chemotherapy. Really ugly, but he seemed unaware. Tina, after a long pause, he finally spoke, trembling, you're lying to me, right? You're getting back at me, right? You give yourself too much credit, Jack. I sighed softly. Why would I use my own body to get back at you? Just then, the doctor came in for an examination. Jack grabbed his sleeve, his eyes red, and asked, how much money will it take to cure her? The doctor looked at him, his gaze sharp behind the glasses. Who are you to the patient? My ex-husband. I spoke quietly, Dr. Chris. How long was I unconscious this time? Ignoring Jack, the doctor pulled out a thermometer. 5 days. Your heart suddenly stopped before. So we gave you emergency treatment, and did some checks. The cancer cells have spread throughout your body, so we had to perform another surgery. I nod. Just tell me directly, how much time do I have left? At best, 1 or 2 months. A warm tear falls on the back of my hand. I look up and see Nina sobbing uncontrollably. I pat her arm. Don't cry, it's not like I'm dying right now. Dr. Chris finishes the basic checkup, writes a few lines on the prescription sheet, and hands it to the nurse. Keep adding anti-nausea and pain relief meds for her. The nurse nods lightly and says okay. Jack stands nearby the whole time, just watching. I'm the one who's sick. I'm the one who's dying, but his face looks incredibly pained. What are you pretending to be all emotional for? Nina's voice is icy. Got a camera on you, trying to milk your ex-wife's last moments for some sympathy. He just shakes his head, walks step by step to my bedside, and his voice is strained, like it's being forced out of his throat. Tina, you're not sick, you're lying to me, right? Jack, I really don't have the energy to curse you. I look at him quietly. Just get out. I only have so much time left. Don't make it unpleasant for me. Then he suddenly kneels. I'm sorry, Tina. His eyes are red. I thought you wanted more money just to spite me. I thought you took so much money, because you could live well without me. I was wrong. Don't be like this. I want to say something, but all that comes out is boundless fatigue. I guess I really have reached the end of the line. Can't even muster anger or resentment. Nina notices my exhaustion and kicks Jack a few times. Get out. Tina needs to rest. I fall asleep again, only waking the next morning. After sleeping for days, I feel a bit better. I ask Nina to get my coat so we can go for a walk. Her nose is red, but she forces a smile. Sure. While getting dressed, I ask her, is Jack still here? He's outside. Nina, don't forget what we planned. Nina nods and helps me out. Jack silently follows us. Learning from that day, he wears loose clothes and a mask and hat to avoid being recognized. Nina and I first go to the cemetery to visit my mom, then back to the old house I bought. Walking up the sunlit stairs, we run into the upstairs neighbor, an older woman. Tina, you're back. She greets me and then looks behind me. Jack, haven't seen you in a month, been on a trip. I turn sharply and see Jack take a deep breath and nod. Yeah, I'm here with Tina today. Lucy grandma slowly goes downstairs with her cane. When she's far away, I whisper, you came back a month ago. Yes, Jack says softly, after recording a show that day. I don't know why, but I wanted to come back and check. But I didn't see you. I nod. I was already in the hospital by then. Jack looks even more pained. I ignore him and go inside with Nina. Look, this is what I'm leaving you. The house isn't big. We finish seeing it in minutes. But after I'm gone you'll probably not be in the country, so you can list it early to sell. Nina tears up, nodding and shaking her head. Sunlight streams through the windows, warmly touching my skin. I sit by the table and sigh helplessly. It's a pity I have stomach cancer, can't eat anything. Otherwise, I'd surely have some good food before going out. At least, taste the worst cake ever. Nina cries non-stop, even though we rarely contacted each other before. I saw on her occasional tweets that she was always the epitome of a strong woman. Tough experiments and vicious discrimination only made her work harder. Not a single tear. These days by my side, it's like she used up a lifetime's worth of tears. Thinking of this, I feel sorry. Sorry, Nina. Why are you apologizing again? Nina asks with gritted teeth, barely hiding her hatred. You're not the one who should apologize. You're not the one who should die. Jack stands at the door, hears it clearly. His voice is hoarse. You're right, it should be me. I call him softly, Jack. He rushes over, looking at me carefully. How did you know I was in the hospital? Just one question and the big star tears up again. I heard from the company. They knew you had cancer for a long time, but no one told me. What's the use of telling you? I sit quietly, starting to feel cold again, but thankfully summer sunlight is extra warm. Jack, you hate me so much. Think I took so much money from the divorce, knowing I'm sick. Shouldn't you feel relieved? He shakes his head desperately, crying hard. It's not like that. Tina, I just couldn't figure things out for a moment. You're still the one I love most. Don't die. Give me a chance to make it up to you. You're lying again. Jack, you figured it out a long time ago. You chose between your bright future and me without hesitation. Otherwise, why post those photos to smear me? That year at the gala, a newbie like you got the chance to perform on stage. Wasn't it because I drank with those people? And Rachel, you've only known her for 2 or 3 years. How could you sing Proposal to her? When you sang about 10 years and 3,600 days together, didn't you feel a bit guilty? Jack's face turns pale. In the end, he was too exhausted to argue, so he just kept apologizing to me over and over again. The following days, I was always tired, sleeping almost all day and night. Besides Nina, Jack cancelled all his plans to stay at the hospital. He even brought that old guitar and carefully asked me, Tina, want to hear a song? I glanced at him. I thought Rachel had already replaced that guitar. Jack's face went pale, and he said with difficulty, I've already broken up with her. Tina, I was wrong. Admitting his mistakes at the brink of death seemed too cheap to me. That afternoon, I was sitting in the hospital garden when Jack received a call from Dwayne. The other side must have been really upset, because even from where we were, we could hear his manager's voice. Get back to the company now. Immediately, Jack was silent for a moment. I have something to do. What? Spend time with your dead ex-wife? The voice on the other end got even more aggressive. Don't you get it? She planned this all along. If you don't come back now, your career is going to be ruined by her. Jack hung up the call and walked over to me. The glow of the sunset was dim. There was a breeze blowing through, lifting the messy strands of hair on his forehead. His eyes were red, but he was smiling. Tina, how do you want to get back at me? I'll go along with whatever you want. At 6 p.m., a scheduled Facebook post was released from Nina's account. It was the recording of our conversation that day in the old house. And that was just the beginning. Jack, we've been through more than 10 years together. Those mornings and nights, every memory is so intimate with each other. You can't erase them. Not completely. I looked up at him, my voice calm. Go back. He shook his head and knelt on one knee in front of me, pulling up my fallen socks. I tried to persuade him gently. Jack, your career is over. You'll never be the top star again. Jack shook his head, carefully examining my face. Tina, do you feel any better today? Do you want to eat something? Honestly, I couldn't figure out what he was thinking anymore. He was the one who left everything behind for his bright future, and now he's the one staying at the hospital, ignoring everything. Back in the ward, I checked my phone, and online gossip was already blowing up. Despite all of Dwayne's PR efforts, they couldn't stop his reputation from crashing like an avalanche. Because the recording was irrefutable evidence, some fans who attended the concert even posted photos and videos from that night. In the photos, I was sitting in the front row of the auditorium, looking up at Jack and Rachel on stage with teary eyes. One of the former fans angrily declared, no wonder Tina left before the concert ended that night. Turns out Jack's success was built on her blood and tears. I can't believe I used to be a fan of this guy. So disgusting. With a tinge of malice, I played the recording in front of Jack, our voices echoing in the ward. Jack listened in a daze for a moment and then spoke with difficulty. I didn't realize I had done so many wrong things to you. Tina, it wasn't supposed to be like this. I always wanted to be super successful and take you to the top, to the brightest places. How did it end up like this? At the end, his expression was confused and pained. That probably wasn't fake. But what right does someone lost in their glory have to apologize? I bent over and began to cough and retch uncontrollably until my blanket and clothes were speckled with blood. Nina had gone to buy a small cake for me, and it was Jack who came over to pat my back, holding a cup of warm water to my lips. I barely took a sip before throwing up all over him, the stomach acid mixed with blood, producing a nasty smell. Raising my head, Jack's eyes were even redder. According to Nina and my plan, the evidence was being released steadily and systematically. Videos from high school of Jack singing at the art festival. Photos of him holding my hand from behind, teaching me to play the guitar. Faced with 11 years of undeniable reality, even the best PR company couldn't turn the tide. Each Facebook post had tens of thousands, even hundreds of thousands of comments. Those beautiful memories turned into sharp swords, wounding not just me, but also those who witnessed and felt the sincerity. One of the most heartbreaking things in the world is seeing promises shatter and genuine feelings turn to ashes. The last post was a video. At first, the footage was shaky, but then gradually cleared up. It showed Jack in a graduation gown, adjusting the camera, handing me a large bouquet of sunflowers, his sharp features softened by a smile. "Congratulations on graduating, Tina." Then came my slightly exasperated face. "You're only a sophomore. Why are you wearing a graduation gown?" "It's okay. Today I'm wearing it with you. 2 years later, you'll have to wear it with me." He came closer, kissed me on the cheek, and sat on the lawn with his guitar. He said, "Tina, request a song." For once, I felt like playing along. Happy breakup. Back then, young Jack's face turned tense and serious immediately. He shook his head firmly. "We will never break up, never. I'd rather die." Then he started singing the sweet love songs he'd written for me. Unfortunately, he was the one who wanted to break up, and I was the one who was dying. The heavens are so unfair. All these years, I believed firmly that when Jack made it big, I'd be there by his side. And now, even if he's climbing high on his own, it doesn't matter. I'd use my death to drag him down, together into the abyss. Jack. When Nina came back with the cake, I had already stained a large part of Jack's white t-shirt with blood. Her face turned deathly pale, and she rushed over, trying to call the doctor. I shook my head and held her hand. "I want to taste the cake." The cream slided down my throat, and I smiled. "Not as bad as you said. I guess you're just picky." Then I threw it all up. Nina was crying uncontrollably, even more than when I took her spot for the national scholarship back then. I couldn't help but feel a bit guilty inside. "I should have sent you farther away to get something so you wouldn't have to go through this parting. I've already been through this once and knew how it felt." Nina held my gradually cooling hand, shaking her head. "If you don't let me stay with you even in death, I won't talk to you in the afterlife either." I closed my eyes and smiled, my voice hoarse and harsh. "You've got a PhD in physics and you still believe in this." "Forgot to tell you, Nina. Actually, I took the IELTS. My plan was to break up with Jack and then go abroad to find you. If it weren't for this illness, we should be sitting side by side on the other side of the earth right now. Maybe in some riverside cafe. Or perhaps in that endless wheat field you told me about. But now, forget it. Just forget it." When I open my eyes, Jack's face is still in front of me, though a bit blurry. He seems to have suddenly calmed down and softly asks me, "Do you want to hear another song? Tina, how about I sing Proposal for you?" "Don't sing." I rasp out, "Jack, you really sound terrible singing now." "Sorry. Besides, the best version I've ever heard was that summer when I was 20. That summer wasn't as hot as this one." Night wind blew, bringing the sound of cicadas and the fragrance of flowers. Shadows swayed under the streetlights, gradually drifting away. 18-year-old Jack leaned in, our heads touching. "Tina, how about not going back tonight?" "Why?" His long, beautiful fingers plucked the guitar strings. "Just stay here, and I'll sing to you all night." I said, "Okay. As long as you sing, I'll keep listening." Later, I went through a lot of things, and I always said that, even if the whole world stops listening, it doesn't matter. I'll always be your one and only audience. Who broke that promise first? Who walked away first? The scene before my eyes gets more and more blurry. Gradually, I can't see anything at all. I slowly close my eyes, feeling warm drops of liquid falling on my face. Jack's voice seems to come from a far distance, misty and calm like still water. He says, "Tina, wait just a little bit longer. I'll be right there." I don't really understand, but whatever. I'm dying anyway. I really don't want to guess his thoughts anymore. I can hear cicadas outside the window. I died in the summer of my 29th year. Nina's epilogue. When Nina went back to that old house to tidy up Tina's belongings, she found some IELTS study materials on the bookshelf. She opened them up. There were quite a few notes written in the notebooks and vocabulary books. Tina was always quiet and gentle, but her handwriting had a sharpness to it. Nina pulled out a cigarette, lit it, and bit it between her teeth. She continued to search and found a passport and visa. The date was from 6 months ago. It seemed to be just before she was diagnosed with cancer. Tears burst out like a broken dam, and Nina's hand holding the passport began to tremble. She stubbed out the cigarette and walked out the door. As expected, Jack was standing outside. When he saw her, his weary face lit up with a desperate plea. "Let me in, just for a look, please, or tell me how much this house is. I'll buy it from you." Nina didn't say anything. She bit down on her cigarette, grabbed Jack by the collar, and punched him in the nose. Jack staggered back a couple of steps, but didn't fight back. Then Nina punched him again. She had been wanting to do this for a long time. She hadn't made any friends all these years abroad. She knew her personality wasn't very likable. When the pressure got too much, she would go to the gym at school to box. Sweating it out helped clear her mind and ease that pent-up frustration. Her strong personality and harsh words meant she hadn't made many real friends over the years. Tina was the only one. She was like a reed in the wind, silent and soft, yet incredibly resilient. At first, Nina looked down on her for always focusing on a guy 2 years younger than her, until Tina took the national scholarship from her 2 years in a row. Nina was furious, slamming doors and glaring at Tina in their dorm. She was waiting for Tina to get mad, stand up, and have a fight with her, maybe even a physical one. She was confident she could easily beat this frail girl, but Tina stood up and smiled softly. "Wanna go to the cafeteria together?" Nina was stunned. "They are serving your favorite teppanyaki beef today. If we go late, it'll be gone." That soft, warm hand took hers, and Nina's ears turned red where no one could see. She had so much she wanted to say, like "How do you know I like teppanyaki beef?" or "How do you know today's menu at the cafeteria?" But in the end, she just said weakly, "Don't think this means it's settled." What was there to settle? It was her own lack of skill. What else could it be? Nina held onto this grudge until Tina collapsed during a physical exam, and Nina finally had a chance to pay her back by carrying her to the hospital. "You're so light. Spend less on that boyfriend of yours and take better care of yourself." Hands on her hips, Nina said roughly, but Tina just smiled and nodded. Nina knew she wouldn't listen. This woman was like that, gentle on the outside, but stubborn to the bone. Even after Nina went abroad, Tina stayed by Jack's side, following him everywhere. Because of her parents' previous experiences, Nina didn't believe that lovers who suffered together could eventually thrive together. But no matter how much she tried to convince Tina, she would comfort Nina, then turn around to help Jack find another opportunity. Nina was driven crazy by this frustration and eventually said harshly, "Don't contact me anymore." Then one day in the lab, after several sleepless nights, Nina fell asleep at her desk. She dreamed of Tina. In the dream, Tina was gaunt, but still had that same smile. "Nina, you need to curb your bad temper, or you won't make friends. Mind your own business." Nina glared at her. "You've got the nerve to talk. Has Jack made it after all these years? Has he given you a good life?" Tina was still smiling, but her eyes looked incredibly sad. "Yeah, you're right. I was wrong." Nina woke up. The more she thought about it, the more uneasy she felt. She took out her phone and looked up news about Jack back home. Despite the slander, Tina had never said a word in defense, nor had she replied to any of Nina's messages. Nina felt something was off, took a leave, bought a ticket to go back home, and asked around to find out where Tina was. Stomach cancer, late stage. Her mental defenses crumbled in an instant. "What are you doing, young lady? You'll kill someone if you keep this up." A terrified voice snapped her out of her daze, and several people pulled her away. There was a sharp ringing in her ears, and it took her a moment to realize what was happening. Jack was curled up on the ground, battered and bruised, blood on his face and forehead, and a deep cut at the corner of his mouth, almost disfigured. Nina spat on his face and sneered, "Go ahead, call the cops. I dare you." Jack looked at her, his lips moving as if he was trying to say something. Nina didn't catch it. She stepped closer. "What's that? Speak up. I won't report you." Tina wouldn't like that. "You still dare to mention her, you bastard. What right do you have to talk about her?" Nina was instantly enraged. She kicked Jack's shin, and was about to hit him again, when the people around them stopped her. Someone finally recognized Jack. Isn't that the big celebrity? What kind of celebrity does that to his wife? No wonder he got beaten up. Shivering, Jack slowly stood up, looking desperately at the door behind Nina. 11. After a while, he finally walked away. Nina went back inside, closed the door, and sat down wearily on the floor by the entrance. She watched her tears create dark patches on the carpet. That night, Jack held a press conference alone. In front of the cameras and microphones, he confessed everything. He admitted Tina had been with him for many years, explained how those photos came about, and acknowledged that her illness was related to him. In the end, even the reporters in the front row couldn't stand it. One of them cursed him angrily, calling him scum. Jack gave a slight smile at the camera and said, "Yes, I am scum." Then, later that night, news came of his suicide. As if he was afraid he wouldn't die, he took 2 bottles of sleeping pills and then slit his wrists in a bathtub full of hot water. When she heard the news, Nina didn't say anything. She just lit a cigarette on the balcony and watched the white smoke rise between her fingers and then slowly drift away. After a while, she suddenly let out a cold laugh. "Better that he's dead," she said hoarsely, almost whispering to herself. "If he hadn't died, who knows, maybe I'd also take a knife to him before leaving the country." "Tina, hurry up a bit. Hurry up a lot," she continued. "The road to the afterlife is long. Don't meet any more people you don't like." That night, Nina finished an entire pack of cigarettes on the balcony, then received a call from her alma mater where she was supposed to start her PhD. "Yes, I'm sorry. I can't accept the offer to teach at the school right now. This time coming back to the country, I intend to stay for a while." Nina tilted her head back, looking at the moon. It seemed unchanged from all those years ago, when she and Tina used to gaze at it from their university dorm balcony. "Because there's someone very important to me here. I think I'll stay to be with her."